You'll be my forever friend. This love will never end. No, no, nothing can come between us. No, never with you.
We talk about often here, letting God be the master of your emotions. I use the metaphor of, your soul being like a ship, right? And every ship needs a captain, right? And depending on who's the captain seated in that ship, it's going to make you navigate life, right? In a certain way, right? And so when you submit, that means, okay, you have now, right, said, faith is the captain of my ship, and I'm not going to deter from that. No matter how it feels, no matter how it looks, no matter if it's one or a million people that I'm in front of, I'm going to continue to go, and pursue what it is that God has given me to pursue here, or pour out what God has ordained for me to pour out here for others to experience and be impacted by. So that's the difference, and of how somebody can go through that whole process of learning how to, not just hear but listen, learning how to not just listen but understand, learning how to not just understand but accept, learning how to not just accept but receive, learning how to, not just receive but embrace, and then learning how not just to embrace but to submit wholeheartedly to what, right, the God-given purpose on their life is, submit wholeheartedly to the God-given purpose and vision of their marriages, right, their relationship is. Submission is, the vision is greater than anything else that can come, in my thought, in my being, to either come to, as they say, be an op, opposing factor to my dreams, or an opposing factor to the love that we have developed and established in this relationship. The vision is greater, and I submit to that wholeheartedly. And I know that I'm a piece, an element, a component, a part of a greater picture, that I am grateful and have the honor to add my little 2 cents to it, put my little drop in this massive ocean, of life that we're swimming in, and living through. So that's the difference. I thought about, just to make something comical, because, I'm always getting deep here. Oh my gosh, HG Dream, how are you? Thank you for popping in. But to add some little comical, hopefully, I don't know. It's funny to me. I don't know if it's going to be funny to you guys. Look at me laughing already. But I thought about when we were talking about on the last episode, the difference between receiving and embracing. I thought about anybody who is an avid church goer, and particularly, I don't know, is it in other churches? But I in my history, I've gone to Black churches, right? Mostly Black people there. So we call it the church hug. And now that I think of it, it's not just Black culture for sure, because I have gone to other churches, different, ethnicities and things, and they still do. It's universal, right? So we call it the church hug. Anybody who has been in church, especially when it comes to, right, people of the opposite sex are hugging, but I've definitely seen people of the same sex do it too, but definitely of the opposite sex, right? And so, you got that one hand arm that goes around you, and then you kind of like, you stick your butt out so that like you're not pressed up against each other, right? Just because you're not trying to, and so, you give you a little hug, but it's not a true embrace, right? Because I can tell the difference, like if I'm, hugging like some of our friends and they're of the opposite, sex, and we give it, it's still respectful, but it's a genuine hug, right? It's a genuine hug. Whereas it's not that you're not trying to be genuine. I get why they do it, but it's not a real embrace. Like sometimes if you see somebody you haven't seen in a long time, and somebody who you truly love and care for, you're just trying to embrace them. It's free from all of, oh my gosh, I don't want to cause anybody to lust or something like that. You know what I mean? There's none of that there. It's just authentic love. It's in the moment, and you just embrace that person because of what they mean to you. And it's something that's like innate and you just do it. So definitely, right? That's a difference between saying just receiving where, your dreams are knocking at the door, God's knocking at the door, love is knocking at the door. I don't know if the people in the relationship is really fully ready to open the door and allow love to come in, and clean house, right? Because clean house doesn't just look like, oh, yeah, I feel all the warmth and the hugs and kisses. No, cleaning house can look, as the Bible says, an open rebuke is better than concealed love. And love oftentimes can come in via correction, right? It says in the Bible, God chastens who he loves, and I definitely have experienced it for sure. And like I said, it is going back to the example that I used when my musical mentor, pointed me out when I was going to try to just, hang out in the background and fake the funk, he didn't let me fake the funk in that class. And I'm grateful because it wasn't just me, lip syncing in that class. It afforded me to find the superpower in my voice so that I wouldn't lip sync through life. I wouldn't fake the funk in life. Sometimes we don't connect the dots and we don't put, that you're doing this in this area that also can, permeate and impede on other areas that you definitely don't want to do that. And for me, it was monumental. It was very pivotal, not only in me cultivating my voice as a singer, but just me, because the fear was crippling, not just the beauty, the natural beauty of my voice, but just my voice and being able to hold space in the world and take up that space fully and allow, right, God to work on me, develop my character and things like that, so that when I take up this space fully, then the impact that I make, the impact that needs to, or the target that I need to hit, I don't miss it. I hit the target and I make the impact in other people's lives as well, because I've not been afraid to go through the process myself, right? And so again, in that statement, it was God communicating to me, it would be a disservice to you, Charla, for me to let you feel like you were a person that I made that is supposed to go hide in the background. Like, what would make you think that I made you that way? No, I'm not going to do that disservice to you. You are going to face this fear. This fear is not only going to work on your voice, but it's going to shape your character so that you can be the voice in the world that I've called you to be, And so that's the difference, right, between embracing versus full out submitting, right? Definitely, if you walk away with anything else from this episode, is definitely think about the story 3 Feet from Gold, and have that be, I guess I don't want to say a warning metaphor. Yeah, I don't want to say that. I want to say a story that you can utilize and apply to your own journey and process, to say to yourself, when maybe, possibly, I don't know who's listening, if there is doubt that comes your way, to keep going, to make and place faith be the captain of your ship, to steer you and direct you and keep you, right, on the path of your journey so that you can serve and navigate this life to your fullest capacity, silencing your own inner critic as well as the many other inner critics that you might encounter, so that you can be completely overtaken, not only with honor and gratitude, to be able to be in a position to cultivate those gifts that God has put inside of you, and then have those gifts serve others in this life, but also to understand that it's a, as I've learned in communication studies, the sum of all parts, right? They make up the whole, right? And so your part, what you do, is extremely important. So again, I'll keep echoing that statement that I heard, that I'm so grateful that God did for me, which is that it would be a disservice for you to hide away or hide your gifts or not function to your fullest capacity, not only to yourself, but also to the ordained and divine people who are meant to hear, or experience what it is that you have been gifted to do here, And so always think, I might be 3 feet from gold, whatever. Well, somebody trying to overtake this ship. So whether it's my emotions right now is trying to take me off course, or whether it's somebody's doubt, I don't know, my own doubt, whether it's this obstacle and this challenge that I'm like, oh my gosh, am I going to be able to see my way through this and push through this? Whatever it is, I could be 3 feet from gold. So I'm going to continue digging. I'm going to not only embrace, but I'm submitted to this thing. And I don't know, submission, the process can, only God truly knows, right? How the details, the meticulous, finite, details of your life will unfold, but it's okay. Because if faith is the captain of your ship, then trust is there. I always say you cannot have faith without trust. That's the beautiful part of submission. And that's also the beautiful part about faith, because there is no faith without submission and trust, right? So, you put faith back there. You say, okay, no, the ship is not going to be overtaken. Let me put my captain back on there, right? My faith captain there, and allow it to navigate so that you don't stop when you are possibly 3 feet from whatever that goal looks like, right, for you. So definitely, hopefully, this episode encouraged you guys. And I hope this whole series, first of all, I hope I tried to clarify it as much. They are simple statements, yet complex ideas within the simple statements. And as I stated before, I tried to give it like a progressive type of pathway of how we get to a point of complete submission, how we get to the point of relinquishing pride, relinquishing ego, relinquishing self-doubt, all of those things. And, hopefully what you see happens in the progression in tandem is that while being able to develop the skill of being able not just to hear, but to listen, to not just to listen, but understand, to not just understand, but accept, to not just accept, but receive, and so on, is that while those are tools that you can put in your relationship skills development toolkit, and that you are also growing in wisdom, that the wisdom is also showing you that the more you grow in wisdom, the more you understand that in this life, it's really a process of letting go and free falling and trusting the process that God has you in. So it's almost like the more you think you start maintaining the heart posture of being okay with knowing that you don't know. If that makes any sense. A lot. It reminds me of how we work really, lots of people, right? Not everybody, but a lot of people have aspirations to work really hard, or work really smart or strategical to build, wealth for themselves and their family, all just to, right, go back to some of the essential things in life, right? Like somebody might be working like 40 to 60 hour a week, how many days of the year, and then we wait for the moments where we can go on vacation, and everyone's different. Not everybody's the same, but a lot of people like to kind of like, okay, let me go sit on the beach somewhere enjoy the nature. Or maybe it's to build a house that is like um, surrounded by nature. I love watching. I'm sure you guys know because if you watch my videos, you'll see oftentimes, I'll have beautiful houses in the background because I like decor. Thinking of, and I'm putting that out there for my next house that I have, trying to get ideas. And some of them are just so beautiful in the way that they've laid them out. And I remember I used to watch this show, and I forget exactly the name of it, but it was on Netflix. And it was like some of the most like unique designed houses. And a lot of them were unique because of the way the builders would integrate the house in nature. Like I remember seeing one that was like a big like treehouse basically, right? But I mean, a very luxurious one, right? But it was so nestled into the forest. And I was just looking at it and I was just like, isn't this something? Like we just working, to the bone just to go back to the essential things in life that are free. For a lot of people, I think about people who, you know, are born, in islands like I was. And I know it's different now because a lot of those islands have and make a lot of their money off of the resorts that they have. So I'm learning that a lot of the islands, unfortunately, are blocking their native, people born there from going, on the beaches because they want to leave that space for the people who are going there on vacation, which is terrible. But anyway, that's another note. Outside of that, though, right? Those people, if that's not, the scenario in the case, they can just go out and enjoy the beach and enjoy. I remember a video that Ben shared with me, and I loved it because it was a Jamaican man who was saying, you don't let the people sell you lies that you're not living. He was talking to the Jamaican people like you're not living in one of the best places. And he was doing many different comparisons from like living in America versus living in Jamaica. And one of the ones that sold me was like, okay, yeah, you get fresh fruit, like fruit that farmed, when we went to Jamaica we went to witness one of our friends getting married, and oh my goodness, the food was definitely different just because it was right from farm to plate, just fresh. And so just simple things like that, he's like, well, you get to walk out, go to the beach, and no matter how hard we work and don't get me wrong, I'm not saying it to diminish the hard work of people or demean, because I definitely I want to leave wealth in all aspects of life for my children, starting with spiritual wealth and understanding and enrichment, along with financial and emotional, all those things. So it is important, and I think it's okay for us to be aware that we work, for those things, just to have a woosah moment to enjoy the things that God just naturally made that are essential for us to enjoy. So it kind of just, I think of that in that same way, that as we're talking about this process of like, okay, how do I get to a point of complete submission, whether it's I'm struggling because I'm in a marriage that we're having issues and challenges and I don't know what to do, or whether it's in the context of, oh my gosh, I do believe that I am skilled. I do believe I have these talents, but I don't think that I'm really pouring myself out. I don't think that I'm really truly cultivating or really believing in myself at all costs. What do I do? So that is the process, right? It's like, okay, yes, I will sign up, to learn and take on these principles. And as I'm taking it on, I will realize that these principles and these tools that I'm developing are all helping me to understand how to slowly free fall in a very trusting state, to know that God, I can trust his process for me in my life, and I can wholeheartedly submit to and find myself worthy to pour out, the things that he's put inside of me. for the world to see, I always say it here. One of my human basic needs is growth, and I love to create things that outlast me, whether it's me writing a book, whether it's me creating songs that my children can hear and their children can hear, or even these, right, podcast episode videos, whether it's my coaching sessions that I record. All of those are artifacts, you know. In my first book that I wrote, Life in Color, I wrote a poem called Artifact, but I separated the word art dash I dash fact. And it wasn't until, how you're doing something, that's a beautiful thing about art, and I think our whole life is a beautiful, artistic vision created by God. But in that book, I didn't know exactly all of what I was writing, and it wasn't until I let my daughter's godmother hear it in New Jersey, because she has two of them. And the title, the way I put it just stood out to her. And she said, "Oh my goodness, art." She read it like, "Aren't I fact?" Like art I fact. And of course, we know artifacts are things that, right, you can find, that you can leave, and so when she said that to me, it really resonated, because she kept on saying it over and over and again. And of course, she read the poem and she said, "This is so truthful and such a nice reminder to people to remember that the greatest artifact in life, right, is living a life that is well lived." I'll say this final thing and I'll get off with you guys, because I've been on for a while and I'm not going to hold you anymore. I went to past community church on Sunday, and the pastor is doing a wonderful series on the last kingdom. And he said a lot of things that stood out to me. But the one that I'm thinking of now is he was talking about the Apostle Paul, and he was talking about I think either the last letter or one of the last letters that Paul wrote to Timothy. And he knew that basically he was going to die, right, in the name of Christ. And he told him, he said, "I'm being poured out like a drink, but and I have fought the good fight, the good fight of faith." And it resonated with me because, just like I said, the greatest artifact that we have here is living a life that is well lived. And I always say, "Lord, please," I'm not perfect in no way, shape, or form. No one is here, but I do have a heart to serve, and I do love you with every part of my being. And I pray that all the things that I do that draw attention to me will also, reflect the things that are most pertinent to you here in this life, whether it's relationships and letting people know about love, because God cares about relationships. He really does. Marriage was, and still is, the first institution that he built here, and the first commandments you hear, be fruitful and multiply, all of it, it's so important. And you see the ripple effects when it's not done consciously, when it's not supported by the truthful principles of God, and how the broken families get created, and how the trauma occurs, and how, right, even if it wasn't your fault, you have to, it is your responsibility to heal from it, and how we have to take it on and go through the process, right? And so nothing's perfect in life, but I do pray and hope that the things that I do will draw attention, so that, hopefully God will say, "Job well done, good and faithful servant." I pray. That definitely is a number one prayer for myself. And I would say, I pray for all of you who hear my voice, whether it's now in the live or later down the line, if you hear the replay, that, believe in yourself at all costs. Don't stop digging. you might be, not even might, you are, right? Whatever, if it's 3 inches, 6 inches, I don't care how many inches it is, that you are from gold. Let your faith be the captain that navigates your life and puts you in the direction, the continual direction and pathway that you need to be on, so that you have the experiences that God has designed for you to have, and you affect and you impact the people that you're meant here to impact. Do yourself that service, to submit to whatever that process looks like for you, and it might not always be roses, it might not always be that. I definitely thought of Joseph, the story of Joseph, in the Bible, right? God was literally young age giving him dreams, in his family, showing his family bowing down to him, and they did not like that, right? They might have been envious before, but definitely once he told them that dream, they were like, oh, no, you don't, and as maybe some of you don't know the story, but his brothers literally, right, throw him into a pit, and he gets sold in, to slavery, and he has the very gift that God gives him is the gift that is used, that is affords his elevation, right? Because he's able to translate dreams, for the king, and but who, if God tells you that from the beginning, are you going to sign up for that? Most of us no. Most of us know. But that was his destiny. That's how the process unfolded for him. And the very dream that he had came to pass, because the very family that sold him, very brothers that, left him to die, now he is put in position during a great famine in the land to now be the provider of his family. That was his calling. That was his destiny. And thankfully, he stayed the course to see it through, even in the moments where it looked like he was completely losing, So hopefully, like I said, you guys enjoyed it, and I pray that it empowers you to continue on until, right, the day, until your transcendence, to submit to whatever it is that is the will of God that is on your life, and be transformed by the experience, and serve to your fullest capacity to transform, or give other people at least the opportunity to transform in their life.